Okay. I've just finished reading Lamb. I think this is like the third time I've read that book. It's such a good book. It's by Christopher Moore, which there's not a lot of books that he's written that I didn't enjoy. I think there's only one of them that I actually wasn't all that into. And I read a lot of them twice. So he's an amazing author, and I think everybody should check him out. But this book is called Lamb, the Gospel According to Biff, Jesus Christ's Childhood Pal. And it starts off with the angel Raziel arguing with God or God's messenger about whether or not he actually really super duper has to go and get Biff and resurrect him and bring him to a hotel room to make him write this novel, this gospel. And he's just not wanting to do it because he hates Biff. Like, everybody hates Biff. They end up in the hotel room, and Biff is trying to figure out what happened after Jesus died, but he couldn't figure it out, so he's like, whatever, fine, I'll start writing. And then he starts off the story with him as the best childhood friend of Josh, which is Jesus Christ, and that's Jesus's actual name is Yeshua, which is Joshua, which means something like the Messiah has come or something like that. Funny thing is, there's a bunch of Jesuses back then. Like, they all had, a bunch of people wanted to name their kid Joshua. But anyway, that's why they had to say Jesus of Nazareth, because, they were lousy with Jesuses back then. So, okay, so he's best friends with Josh, and he's talking about growing up with him. He met Josh by seeing him resurrect a lizard. And his first interaction with Josh is playing with his little brother with this lizard, and his little brother crushes the lizard with a rock. Josh puts the lizard in his mouth, and the lizard revives, and then he gives it back to his brother, who kills it. And it keeps going, and Biff is like, can I do that? And Josh is like, which part? I don't know. It's full of little non sequitur kind of almost like Terry Pratchett-esque humor. That's kind of the way he writes. It's almost Douglas Adams, just kind of like a lot of really random things happen that are absolutely hilarious. They are inseparable at this point, and they constantly getting into trouble together. It's kind of their last summer of childhood, because they're about to turn 13, and that's the age that they become officially men, and they're supposed to go and start working. And so this is their kind of last cry of freedom as a child. And during the summer, Maggie shows up as a new girl next door character that just moved in, and she kind of helps intercede on their behalf with a bully in the neighborhood that's just the worst guy. He grows up to be a Pharisee, so that's pretty apt. And from that point on, it's a trio, and they never leave each other's side. They're always together, always getting in trouble together. It's pretty endless, and it's pretty sweet. And then they turn 13, and Biff convinces Josh that we're gonna have to be stonemasons with my father, so that, because I don't have a choice, I can't be a carpenter with you and your dad, so you should do this with me so that we'll be together. And it's not that hard. Rocks are everywhere. And then, of course, it turns out to be one of the hardest jobs that exist in that time. So they are working as apprentices for Biff's father, Levi, and the client is a kind of anti-Semitic person, hates the Jews, but hires them because they're cheap. And he's arguing with Biff's dad, Levi, about whether or not he can move this giant statue he just bought into where they're constructing. And Biff's dad's kind of explaining to him the problems with that. I can't remember what they were, but it's like super impractical. And he needs to hire more people and all of this. It's just contractor stuff. And the guy goes on a whole anti-Jewish tirade that is so loud and so ruthless that one of the Roman guards shows up to see what's going on. And Biff and Josh kind of seem to have this relationship with the guard of like, you little scoundrels, haha. They're friends, and the guard kind of seems to be very strongly endeared to them. And the guard is one of the few just guards that are actually honorable in this entire story. Everything calms down, but then Biff and Josh decide to come back and circumcise the statue, because evidently the statue is a naked man and he's very well endowed, and they're like, nah, we're gonna change that. Maggie tags along, and they get in a lot of trouble because they get caught by a guard, not the same guard, a different guard, and they're about to like go down bad. But right before anything pops off, somebody comes up and kills the guard, and they see they see the guy that did it, and Maggie's like, she sees that it's her uncle, and she's like, oh crap. Back then, I guess there was a young rebel group that were trying to create an insurrection, and one of the many things they did was kill as many Romans as possible. And so it was almost like Black Panther-esque. The way that they're described in the book, it kind of reminds me of that, by any means necessary and stuff. But, so now he gets arrested, they take off and leave, and he gets caught and arrested. And now it's looking like Mary's entire family is about to go to prison, because anybody in any way related to one of these people is automatically caught up. And they don't play nicely. They'll torture you until you confess to everything that they could think of. So Josh is like, I know how to fix this, I need to fix this. And he was like, he resurrected one woman one time out of the blue, like when he was just trying to resolve the pain of her son, but it didn't last and it didn't stick, because he's not very skilled in his heavenly gifts. But he's like, this time I'm going to try it for surezies, and I'm going to do it. And Biff needs to distract everybody by singing horrible funeral songs. And he successfully resurrects the guard, and now it's kind of like no body, no crime. And Biff is able to kind of sway him into believing that, I don't know, he's like almost like a really sneaky little lawyer, the way that he handles it, and like kind of twists the whole story up so much that everybody just kind of forgets the whole thing. So Maggie gets to stay, but then her family's like, hey, you're gonna marry the bully now. I don't really know why they would do that to her, but he's one of the kids in the neighborhood that are from the most prominent family, and so they think it's a good thing. But Mary's heartbroken and pissed off, and Josh has just found out that he's going to need to go and find the wise men that came to him as a child. And he finds that out in the temple when they went for the Passover feast, I think it was, and everybody goes to the same one spot, so it's kind of like a huge combination of just different neighborhoods and tribes and stuff. And this is that part of the Bible where he gets separated from his mom, and then he's like, woman, wouldn't you know, why were you worried? I was obviously going to be in my dad's house. Stupid. He spends 3 days. He was trying to get to the Ark of the Covenant, but he ends up not interested in doing that, and instead talking to the rabbi whose job it is to guard the Ark of the Covenant. And the rabbi is the one that tells him where to find the first wise man, Balthazar. They leave Mary. Biff goes to console Mary in Jesus' stead. Like, Josh is telling him, I can't touch or know a woman, and if I try to comfort her before we leave, I know I'm going to fail at that regard, so I need you to go do that for me. And so Biff ends up sleeping with Mary, and then she very quickly figures out that it's not Josh and that it's Biff. But she's not really upset about it. She's just kind of like, this sucks. Everything sucks. Josh is a coward, and you guys are leaving me. And Biff is like heartbroken, but he's gone. And they go on the road, and on the way, they go to a harem sex working house, whatever, because Josh is like, explain everything about Mary and how you did it and what went down. And he's like, I'm not going to tell you about Maggie. I love her. And so Josh is like, fine, let's go in here, and then you can do it there and tell me everything about it. And Biff is like, yes, I will take on the sin of infidelity for you, my best friend. I am going to sacrifice. And Josh is like, thank you for your sacrifice. It's so stupid. Biff becomes quite the slut. And the benefit to him is that Jesus can cure all diseases. So he gets to just play fast and loose with all these women. And every time something pops off, Josh is there to just kind of like, wax on, wax off. We're going to cure you. So, okay. Now they finally got to Balthazar's place. And he's a magician that has entrapped a demon that as long as he maintains the demon's presence on Earth, he is able to continue to live forever. And this has gone on for several centuries. He's teaching Jesus how to do stuff and be, there's a lot of stuff he learns that I don't specifically remember, but it comes in handy, and it's not really that prevalent. It's a very long book, so we're just gonna skip. Biff, because he's Biff, he unlocks the door and lets the demon loose, because nobody told them that there was a demon in there. He's just, what's behind that door? I'm not allowed to touch it. I'm gonna go touch it. And the demon comes out and kills all the women that Balthazar had as his, little personal harem. And who also Biff was very much in love with every single one of them and doing all the dag nasties with every single one of them. And now they're all dead, and he's like, except for one, and he's like, this sucks. Damn. Then Josh has to return because he and Balthazar were off doing some sort of lesson. And he comes and sends the demon back to hell where he belongs. And that kills Balthazar. So Balthazar is dead. The woman, there's an Asian woman. He collected all these women from all over the ages and times. And one of them just happened to be Chinese. And she ends up inheriting all of his estate because he died and there's nobody to stop her. They're like, all right, that was fun. We're out. So now they're on their way to China, because that's where Balthazar told them was the next magi, is a Chinese Buddhist monk. And this is where they go to the door, and they're knocking on the door of the Buddhist temple, and they won't answer. And if they do, they're like, get out of here. You're fat. You're ugly. It's very much Fight Club-esque. It kind of reminds me of that. And then that's when Jesus, and there's a lot of the little things like this, but here's one of them. Josh looks at Biff and he's like, you know what? I would never do this to someone. I'll make it a point that if anyone knocks on my door, I will let them in, and it doesn't matter who they are. And that's kind of a ask and knock and the door shall open for you kind of thing. Just a little biblical reference, a little seasoning of faith. It's kind of beautiful. I love it. Anyway, so he starts to learn the art of kung fu and one hand clapping and all of that stuff, and he gets to find enlightenment so strongly that Josh disappears, and he's an entity without a physical body, and he's walking around freaking everyone out. They can't get him back from it. And even the Buddhist monk that runs the place hasn't reached enlightenment for sure. And they have to he tells him that the end all be all of Buddhism, which I learned when I studied comparative religion, is essentially when you do finally reach true enlightenment and you come as your last life as a true Brahman-esque enlightened figure, you will have a choice to exit the samsara or the moksha. It's the miserable cycle of pain and suffering of life. You can escape that and go to nirvana, where you will become a part of the essence of the universe, or you can continue on and return to Earth in your next life as an enlightened being and assist in the enlightenment of others and become another Buddha. And so that's kind of like what they tell Jesus when he's all super duper enlightened. And they're like, yeah, you should stop that and be a helpful neighbor. And Josh is like, oh, okay. And then I think the final stage of their enlightenment thing is to go to the mountains, and by way of like, doing all of that, they're able to still their bodies so that the freezing temperatures don't affect them. And they're supposed to starve themselves until they get there and just subsist on the energy of their inner being or something. Like some stupid mumbo jumbo. I don't get it. But anyway, I know it's true. I just don't get it. And they bring all this food up there to this mountaintop where nobody's there. It's very desolate. And they bring it there, and they all go into their little cross-leg poses so that they can still their hearts and maintain their body heat at a specifically not lethal temperature. And Biff, of course, he's never learned how to do this. He doesn't take any of this seriously. He's just a buddy of Josh. So he's awake, and he's like, I'm gonna die. So he piles himself with a bunch of monks. And while he's waiting for them to wake up or to come out of their meditative stance or whatever, a Yeti comes and starts to collect the food, and Biff is like, heck no, Josh, wake up. So he wakes up Josh, and Josh sees the Yeti, and he's like, interesting, I'm gonna go chat with you. And it turns out the Yeti is the last of his kind, and Josh is able to kind of proselytize to him. Everybody goes back to the temple, but Josh keeps on going back to the Yeti over and over and over again, and spending time just witnessing to him and helping him reach his own enlightenment and stuff. And then eventually the Yeti dies, and Josh is heartbroken because he's the last of his kind, and everything is so, so sad. And that kind of is the nail in the coffin of his entire visit to the Buddhist temple. He's like, I've learned everything there is to learn. There's nothing left. It's time to go. So he ends up they go to India. And this is right at the height of the Hindu people's celebration of the war goddess Shiva. I want to say Shiva. I get them all confused. The murderous one, the goddess of destruction. So everybody's like, so many people are being sacrificed. And they're on the road there, and they get saved by somebody who's like, yeah, hey, like, come over to my cave and you'll be safe. And Biff is like, you live in a cave? Josh, he lives in a cave. And it's really stupid because he's really, really hyper judgmental about where he lives. And he lives there with a cow that he believes to be the reincarnation of his wife, and they do a lot of gross stuff. Because they learned about firepower and weaponry, Biff has been learning a second lesson this entire time from what Josh is learning. So at the magician's place, Josh is learning how to use actual magic to create actual results, and Biff is learning about chemistry and how to make firepower and all of this stuff, how to make a bomb, basically, out of, like, literally anything. And at the Buddhist place, I don't remember what Biff learned, other than how to survive boredom. So he uses what he learned as a chemist, and he gets everybody there to help him create this gigantic weapon that he's going to use as a method to end this religious practice, at least this single one. They dress each other up as, like, a giant Shiva goddess, and then Biff creates a gigantic bomb that, like a firework or something, and it makes everybody be like, oh snap, and he's like, I want you to stop. So they stop, and they release all the bonded slaves or whatever. He saves them, and then he sends them back to their parents, and the next day they're worshiping the creation goddess or god, anyway, it's very kind of troublesome and confusing because now they're all suddenly very loving and peaceful people, and Biff doesn't know how to contend with that. But Josh is like, all right, this has been fun, I'm out. he goes and finally finds his May guy, and I don't remember this guy's name either, but he's one of the all right, Hindus have a subgroup of people that believe in the raw essence of the human endeavor, and they live amongst filth and they eat trash, and this guy kind of reminds me of them, because he very much is like, we don't need anything, everything's fine. You know, you live in a cave and you eat a grain of rice a year and you're good. And he teaches Jesus how to duplicate rice. So he has like a single piece of rice in a bowl, and he's like, look, is that a seagull? And they turn around, and then he's like, they look back and it's a whole bowl of rice. So he teaches Josh that, like, how to do that, while Biff is off on his little side quest to learn about, what is it, that sexual practice they got with the, what is it? It's their sex thing. It's the Hindu sex, it's one of their yogas. Go ahead, sweetie. It's, what's it called? Dang. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. It's like a whole book of like sexual positions with really explicit illustrations. So he finds a lady there that teaches him all of this stuff. And he's able to do that by getting Jesus to duplicate coinage. So he keeps bringing like a couple pennies here and there to Josh, and then Josh will make him like enough money for him to buy another night with this girl. And it's gonna drive me nuts. I'm gonna remember what it is at like 3 in the morning. Anyway, Josh learns the essence of Hinduism, the whole concept of oneness with the universe and reincarnation. And the funny thing is, Hinduism and Buddhism is so freaking similar that it's really kind of, it's like reading the same story over and over again. Anyway, now they're done, and he's like, it's time to go back. It's been like, this is supposed to be the accounts of Jesus's missing 30 years, where it starts off in the Bible with him being born, and then it skips to him being a 30-something-year-old man, and there's no account for what happens in between. And so there's a reason why there's this book called the Jesus and Taoism or something, where it finds parallels between Jesus's scriptures, like his verbatim quotes, and the Taoist quotes, and the I Ching, I think it is. And this book is kind of saying, well, this is probably what happened. Like, Jesus went and voyaged into these other lands and picked up some stuff that we didn't have before in the Jewish faith. We didn't have these concepts. Where did he get them from, and why did they come about around the same time that they were being also developed in these other countries? It kind of seems a little sus. Well, Jesus goes back home. His dad is dead, or he died while he was gone, and his little brother is pretty pissed at him for not being around. Mary Magdalene is married to the bully, but she's been making a way around everything for herself, where she is able to like kind of not have a good relationship with her husband, but not have a bad one either. And she basically convinces him that she's on her period all the time, so he won't touch her. They start accruing disciples at this point. The first one is this guy named Bart. He's the village idiot. And he's sitting in the dirt, and he's a dirty guy with all these dogs, and he starts being kind of a comedic parallel because he does discipleship with his dogs, and he's got his 10 disciples too, and he does lessons with them like Jesus does. It's really cute. And then they go through all the ways that Josh accrues his disciples or apostles. I can't get it straight which one is what. But he's out and they're out fishing, and he's like, "Hey, bro, come here." And now we were 4, that kind of thing. And his disciples are all being written as like these really stupid guys, like these really annoyingly dumb, dense guys that don't get it, and they don't get Josh. But his second disciple is John, and John is Josh's cousin. And there was this one scene, I can't remember if I talked about it, but while they were on their way to that temple Jesus got lost at when he was 12 or 13, they passed by John, who's baptizing a bunch of people, or a bunch of little kids. And he's like almost drowning them, and Josh is like, hey, you don't have to do that, man. Like, I'm the Messiah. You're good. And Josh is like, John's like so relieved. He's like, thank God. I didn't want to do this. I was terrified that this was my calling, and I'm not up for it. And also, can you cure my herpes? Like, it's a problem. And Josh is like, sure, I got you. So now they meet up again, and he's out eating locusts and being a wild, stinky man. And Josh is just like sharing with him everything that he's learned on his voyage. And I can't remember all the stories. It's all very, chronologically speaking and historically speaking, it's all very accurate to what the Bible itself says. It just, it makes a mockery of it, so if you're a Christian, it might actually rub you the wrong way, but for me, I found humor in it. I thought it was hilarious. But, it does the whole thing, the fishes and bread thing, fish and bread thing that Josh does, that's kind of linked to the thing he learned from the Hindu Magi, and the water into wine, and he does a bunch of stuff, and all this time, he keeps running into the Roman guard that's cool, the nice one, and then he's also running into the bully, who's, whenever you see in the Bible the Pharisees kind of coming at Jesus, and are, Jesus does the whole give to Caesar what is Caesar's and all of that stuff, that's, in this book, that's the bully. And it finally comes to a head when Judas does what he does and sells Jesus out with a kiss and for the sum of 20 silver pieces, I think it was. And Biff is doing everything he can to save Josh, because he believes and he doesn't believe. He believes that Josh is capable of resurrecting himself and coming back from the dead, but he's also terrified that something can go wrong because he's seen Josh's miracles not work sometimes. And also, he doesn't want his friend to be hurt. He wants him to, be in the Buddhist state of not feeling anything. And Josh is like, no, I'm supposed to be present for this. And he's like, one of the things Biff learned from the magician guy, Balthazar, was he learned how to make a potion that would make you and your body completely numb, and you're incapable of feeling or doing anything. You can't blink, nothing. And then to counteract it, he's got the antidote. And this was a gift to him by the one surviving sex worker or whatever, the woman of the harem of Balthazar. She gifted it to him when they came to visit her on the way back. Anyway, so he's trying to play lots with the guards and distract them while Christ is up on the cross, and while Maggie and her women friends are trying to get the poison thing on the wine post that they're trying to dab his face and get him to drink it and pass out and die, and then they can resurrect him. It works. They get him to take it, and then he finally supposedly succumbs to death. And he's like, okay, all we gotta do is find his body and give him the antidote, and he's fine, he's back. But right before he's able to break up his little gambling thing, the guards are like, is he dead? We can't tell if he's dead. And he's like, I could tell you how I could tell. And they stab him in the side. And Biff is screaming and crying, and he's not able to play like he doesn't care anymore, because his best friend just got killed in front of his eyes, and he's heartbroken about it. And he disappears. He just goes into and he's trying to figure out who did this. He knows one of the disciples did this, and he doesn't know which one to blame. So he finally finds out that it's Judas. And he goes to see Maggie, and he goes to see everybody, and everybody's just shell-shocked, and also everybody's fleeing for their lives, because right when this happens, they start coming for all of his associates, kind of same as what they did with Maggie's uncle. And he's like, okay, well, I don't know what to do. But I know that Judas is the participant or the instigator of this, and I'm going to go figure out what to do about that. And so he goes and finds Judas, and he kills him, and then he kills himself. And that's the end of his gospel. And when he finally finishes his gospel, he had also finished reading the Gideon's Bible that's left in hotel rooms. And he's pretty pissed that none of the disciples talked about him. Like, he's like, I was there before any of y'all. How can you just ignore me and exclude me like this? And, you know, he's kind of criticizing everything. And then on his way out of the hotel room, because Raziel is like, all right, you're done. You get to do whatever you want to do now. And he was like, I don't know what to do. This is so depressing, and I don't know. Can I see Josh again? He goes to leave the hotel room, and as he's exiting, so is Maggie. They brought her back to write her gospel, which is another fun historical accuracy. There is a gospel of Maggie, but there's a question of whether or not it's accurate, canonically speaking, because there's a reason why some books were canonized and some were not. And one of the things that happened after Christ died was the people, everything that we have in our Bible is supposedly written by either his disciples, apostles, or the people that were taught by his disciples. So it's second generation or second degree relation to Jesus. And the ones that were not canonized were written hundreds of years after Jesus Christ is supposedly dead. Like, this is, so it's kind of like, it's almost like people were doing like trade paperbacks where they were just like, you know, hey, I've got a letter from Paul, I've got this, and then when people checked it, it either didn't link up with the way that the things were written before by that same author, and it was obviously not written by them, or it was written so far past the date of that it wasn't, or it was completely irrelevant. It was completely irrelevant to the actual Bible itself, and it may have been historically accurate, and it may have been written by the person they say wrote it, but it wasn't something that was required to be included in the Bible. So, but you should check them out anyway. I like reading them for historical context. But there is a gospel according to Maggie. And so this book finally ends with her kind of doing her little shy smirk at Biff and him being like, talk to me about what happened after. And she was like, he came back. And he's like, yeah, I know. And she's like, he was pretty upset about what you did, and that you didn't have enough faith in him, and that, you know, you killed yourself. And all the disciples were so upset that they didn't want to write about you anymore because, you know, whatever. So he's like, that's all right. I already got to talk to him and see him and everything. We're good. And then they just kind of walk off into the sunset together as a couple, which is, you know, like his lifelong dream. It's pretty cute. Anyway, I skipped a lot of things. This was a very heavy book. It was lighthearted, but it was heavy with literature, almost like historical quips and little puns. And, you know, they have the pun of jujitsu, which, you know, they learn how to do jujitsu. And then they also have a joke about why Jews eat Chinese food on Christmas. And that was like, on Jesus's birthday, he gets to eat like Chinese food in the temple. And like, he's like, I want this every year on my birthday, we're eating Chinese food. And so like, now it's the joke of like, the reason why is because the Chinese people don't necessarily celebrate Jesus's birth either. So like, they're open, and it's one of the few restaurants that are open on Christmas. So the Jews are like, yeah, I guess that'll do. We'll do that. But I don't know. It's funny. There's a lot of that. It's really fun if you're a student of history like I am, or if you are a Christian like I am. I think that it's worthwhile because, one, it puts you in a very human like understanding of what it must have felt like to be Josh or the people around Josh, Jesus. And it also is like, it makes it fun to be a Christian, because, you know, there's a lot of stuff that is very blasphemous and, you know, downright offensive, but it's up to you to be offended or not to be offended. And if you're strong enough in your faith and your relationship with Christ, then it shouldn't really bother you that much. Like, if you could read the Da Vinci Code and the Last Temptation of Christ and all the other things that are trying to say that Christianity is a bastardized version of the Babylonian and what was it, the Sumerian religions, saying that Isis or Osiris, like, there's a lot of parallels to the practices of Christianity and the pagan, quote unquote pagan, and other religions that were around during that time. And I don't personally have a problem with that, because it doesn't bother me that other people believe what I believe in a different way. And I don't feel like I have any end-all be-all say in what's true and what isn't. I just know what I believe. And I mean, the Epic of Gilgamesh has a Noah's Ark story, and China has a Noah's Ark story, and Ethiopia has a Noah's Ark story, which that shouldn't surprise you, because Ethiopia is created off of Solomon's kid, who was a Jew, so it would make sense that they have the same story. But it's just saying, like, you know, I don't know. There's a reason all of these things are similar or have similar connotations or correlations, and it's not to offend you or to make your faith seem small. Like, whatever faith you are, I full-heartedly accept you, and I find humor in every religion. Every religion has some ridiculousness, and mine is not exempt from that. So that's why I can enjoy a book like this. But anyway, that was enough of that. You should read it because it's a good freaking book. And Christopher Moore is God's gift. I love him. He's got a way of writing women that makes me happy, and he's got a lot of novels where you don't know what's going to happen. You never know who's going to die. You never know who's going to do what. It's very, you know, spontaneous. And it's fun to read something where there's no curriculum. There's no, like, formula. So I would advise you to read anything he wrote. Anyway, I'm here. All right, I'm out. Bye.